I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. We're on a mission to revamp society by amplifying your humanity. This week on the show,
my name is Oscar La Madrid. We immigrated in 72. I did a little time in the Marine Corps. Did I tell you the exciting part of my life? There's a lot of implications, a lot of impacts from a deployment. Founder of a nonprofit. The whole point is to re-engage that person that was in crisis, a transition point for them to go into the real world, take their training, hopefully, and transition that into civilian life. To be a giver, not a taker.
This episode so perfectly embodies the personality of guest Oscar La Madrid. He's a dad, husband, Marine veteran, and founder of Angels Alive, a nonprofit near Atlanta, Georgia that feeds, rehabilitates, and now aims to house veterans who are struggling to integrate into society. We start out with Oscar talking about his own intensity, which leads us into his family's immigration story. He came to America from Lima, Peru when he was 12. He details the poverty he worked his way up from and how that has fueled his desire for success in life. In seeing his own success and relying on his intensity, he's found a way to help facilitate success for others and explains why this is so important for veterans in crisis. This leads us into talking about his nonprofit, Angels Alive, how it got started, how he channels himself into it, and how it's evolved since inception. Angels Alive partners with businesses to achieve the rehabilitation needs their veterans have, such as hot meals, clothing for job interviews, therapeutic activities such as farming and scuba diving, and they even partner with local law enforcement to diffuse situations where combat veterans need to be understood so a situation can de-escalate. In fact, I met Oscar because he was looking for a community partner to tell the story of a veteran who rode in the Hoka Motorcycle Challenge in August of 2020 to raise money for Angels Alive. If you follow Human Amplified on Facebook and Instagram, you probably saw some of that inspirational story about Rider 954 who comes up in this conversation. The evolution of Angels Alive is really a manifestation of Oscar's presence and intention coupled with his life experience, because through all the services Angels Alive offers to give veterans a sense of purpose, contribution, community, and connection, Oscar has married his family values, including his love for cooking with his grandmother in Peru, to his own understanding of reintegrating into society after coming home from the Marines in 1992. Hey guys, head on over to humanamplified.com/shop and support this show by purchasing some of our awesome merch today. We have everything from shirts, hats, stickers, to original fine artwork just waiting for you to bring it home.
My name is Oscar La Madrid. I'm the father of 5 amazing children. I have an amazing wife, Julie Nicole, who's really been an anchor to keep so many things together during good times and certainly during not so good times. I have so many different profiles, right? There's the founder of a nonprofit, there's the engineer in telecommunications, there's the father, the husband, there is the friend, the neighbor, the uncle, the godfather, a couple of times over. So I got goddaughter and a godson who just keeps the wallet really empty. And a couple of dogs don't help either. But it's all in all a family that's helped me kind of travel through the world, if you will. And in '07, post the Marine Corps, we founded a nonprofit to really help our children learn what it's like to be altruistic adults, learn what it's like to be a giver, not a taker. This day and age, everybody is on their phones, their iPads, etc., and it becomes really difficult to identify your profile for humanity. And so that's why initially I started with, it'd be nice to be kind one day.
Yeah.
I've never had those attributes.
I think you're nicer than you think you are. Maybe you're a bit humble.
I must be humble because every day I truly feel a calling. Every day I thank the Lord and Savior above because it's one more day on earth.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time in my life, a very dark moment, where I did not think I'd have any of those. And I've had so many traumatic events that I feel like a cat that's about to run out of lives.
Okay.
And I just don't know which one that is. I mean, just a high level. I've completely submerged a brand new car into a lake,
Oh, wow.
inundated in water. I've had an 18-ton piece of granite land on top of me, literally. I've been up under a tractor trailer on a motorcycle that came out the other end.
Oh my
I
gosh.
still visit the lady who experienced it because I feel horrible at her impact. I did a little time in the Marine Corps. Did I tell you the exciting part of my life? And so, yeah, there's a part of me who really believes that humility and grounding, right?
Mm. Mhm.
My wife is very good at keeping me grounded. She pops the balloon quite often to make sure I stay on the ground. But all joking aside, it is very difficult to deliver on so many efforts
Mhm.
and yet stay humble. So
Sure.
I've partnered myself with really good people that are strong motivational speakers that are influencers as they call nowadays, and they really do a good job of keeping me on task and certainly focused. So humility is one of those things. My godmother recognized it when I was very young that I did not have a lot of patience.
Mhm.
So that's something that I will continue to ever work on is my patience, which coupled with a little humility might end up making a decent person one day.
Okay.
I often joke and say that because it's a big world. It really is
Yeah.
a big world.
We've talked a little bit off recording because I worked with you to get the word out about a friend who was riding in the Hoka motorcycle challenge. And you said to me that you have to have a life of chaos to keep focus. And this was when we were getting to know each other. So you've talked about how you're a really intense person. And I just sort of want to dive into that. What do you mean by that statement?
People are known by what they can deliver, right? So you make a promise, and if you deliver it, you're doing well. If you deliver it ahead of time, you're doing really well. And in the core, one thing as an O3, and especially as a deployed O3, what you find is that the ability to multitask and have many things going on at one time, where you can actually deliver on everything that's going on, whether it's logistics, whether it's planning, whether it's work details, whether it's, evolutions, whether you're logistically organizing something. If you can have multiple things truly flowing, in the corporate world, they call them swim lanes, right? So you have different efforts from different work groups. And oftentimes those work groups cross into another, and you have to depend on another organization to deliver something. Well, the problem is that conceptually it's great. It's a great idea. You have an A point and an end point. In reality, those points where the swim lanes are crossed or breached at times may be all compliant or non compliant. And so the ball will often drop. And one thing that we've learned is the fact that if you have multiple irons on the stove, for example, you need to keep an eye on every single one. And for those that have experience, travel abroad, you start to quickly realize that's your A game. When you can actually keep 4 or 5 things, and I was in charge of 27 guys, that's 27 lives. You keep all of them differently because you know what? They're not all the same.
Mhm.
They're all different characteristics. Some of them like to be babied, some of them are narcissists, some of them are what have you. And you have to be able to approach every different person a certain way to get the best out of them. And my job as their leader was obviously to ensure that one, they have the abilities and skill sets necessary for the role. Two, they have all the equipment and anything they need to fulfill that role. And I need them, I demand that their success. And it's the same with my kids. You prepare them, you show them what the boundaries are, and you let them know that you expect much more than the average parent. I don't expect you to be average. Anyone can be average. That takes no effort at all. But the intensity comes in when you realize that you can drive someone to exceed their own expectations.
Hmm.
I've had 3 of my 5 kids already come to me and said, Dad, my hustle is hard because of you. I have a desire. I said, we have to find different drivers. I brought my kids up in a very nice environment with a wonderful lady who's kept them at home and taught them the soft skills necessary. They didn't have the luxury of poverty that I had to create their hunger, their appetite, their desire to succeed. I don't accept mediocrity. I never have.
Hmm.
And I'm very demanding in that sense. And they've realized that maybe dad's super demanding because he really expects an outcome. And it's not because I'm going to expect a big limo or a house or a car for them to give me. There's a lot of things that people are not prepared for.
Yeah.
And sometimes internalizing a climate as we have in today with such divide, you start to see the weakness. It starts to come a little bit closer to the surface.
Hmm.
We need to prepare our kids, our children to be better equipped and adapt to that. I was very strict with my daughters, for example, because I know what a male manipulated society we in corporate America is. And I needed them to be prepared for that. There's
Okay.
shortcomings and there's uneven playing fields, but I need their awareness. They are similar to the red campaign that we drive. Sometimes people talk about being, there's, oh, my friend got deployed, my cousin, my nephew. We never mention the wife, the spouse, the mother, the children, the aunt, the grandmother who's now, their little grass cutter just went away. There's a lot of implications, a lot of impacts from a deployment. And, socially, if we can just show our solidarity, get our community to truly understand that we are one America, irrelevant of color, creed, and race, we'll go a lot further. There's a lot of people who benefit financially from dividing, but that's a whole nother topic.
So that intensity, I guess, you use to basically help the people around you exceed their potential. Is that what I'm hearing?
In a way of sorts. So sometimes some character types do not do well with intensity. There are those who, again, have been sheltered a lot and are not really prepared to take on someone that's saying, "Hey, I need you to do meet this date by this time," and then you have to give them the opportunity and the equipment to get to that success. Because at the end of the day, they're representing you, right?
Mhm.
An extension of you. So the intensity is something to open up people's eyes and get them to understand. Hey, in my head, I have this blockage. I know I'm not going to do better than, to give it a numerical value, better than a 6, right? I'm just a little bit above average. But when you empower that person, when you, especially a young lady, when you empower her and you get her to understand that attainable 7 or 8 or 9 is reality, and they scratch the surface of that, all of a sudden they have that epiphany. They have that aha moment. And that right there is called confidence, because oftentimes we lack confidence as human beings.
Mhm.
This world is so competitive, it's built around being torn as opposed to being building up.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from.
Okay. And so you are a Marine. You've been home since 1992, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so when you told me about your intensity and when I met you for the first time and noticed it, it was in that context. So how do you channel that intensity to lead a normal life?
So the reality is that you just hope that your homework is being done and that your expectations are being met. But you have to be able to strategize and you have to understand the game of chess, because there are many pieces that are moving all the time, and there has to be a harmony in those pieces moving, so that you can, in one example, deploy over 40,000 routers in over 19 states. And I was able to control that from Atlanta, from one city. And I would have the employees' bosses call me like frantically, like, "Oh my God, my guy's doing overtime. What's going on?" I said, "Well, I challenged him. No one's ever challenged him. I want him to believe in himself," going back to that confidence level. And I learned a lot, from my father in law, where being a humble person with a seventh grade education, he would challenge you not for the output that he or dividend that he's getting, but he would challenge you to believe in yourself.
Hmm.
Boy, do I wish we had more humans like that person.
Yeah. I want to go back just a little bit before we sort of pivot and ask you about the poverty that you said you had the luxury of experiencing.
I'm ready. You got me excited.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
let's do it. So,
So can I tell you why you got me excited?
why?
High level. I took my children. I took 3 of my sons to the projects that I grew up in, and I asked them to get out of the car. One of them asked me, "Was I crazy?" Right away. They're all prepared mentally and physically. And I said, "What's the matter?" He goes, "Dad, it's like 11 o'clock at night. Why? This is the hood." I said, "Okay, well, I'll get out first." So we get out. The irony for me to expose them to something can I say that they're little candy asses? Can I say that word?
Yeah, you can say that
Okay.
word.
So for me to expose them to something like this was tragic. I mean, I can expect my grandkids to come back and go, wow, my dad's still scared to death of that one day. So the irony for me was I grew up in Athens, Georgia. My mother, I can tell you this, my mother and father worked tirelessly. We immigrated in 72, and my sister was born in Anderson, South Carolina, because we were fleeing immigration. This
Okay.
is a real story. So all these little kids, these little anchor babies people talk to, I have no sympathy for that. I have very strong beliefs in the naturalization system. It's antiquated. It should be updated, yes. But the reality is that if you do the right thing here in the US, you truly can rise.
Okay.
And I would always, as a kid, 11, 12-year-old kid, rather, I would look across Baxter Street, which is now Baxter Hill. And ironically, that's the university that I graduated from. I would always ask myself, what do those kids do that are allowed to go there? What makes them different than me, right?
Mhm.
And funny enough, a couple years ago, my daughter's her freshman year, they're obligated to sleep in dorms. I never had that luxury, but she had a dorm, and I sat in her room and I looked across and I could see the apartment that we lived in right across the street in public housing. It's not something I'm embarrassed about. I used to be very much. Me and a good friend of mine, Edgar, one of my best friends, Bernales, we would always make it appear that we were just average good kids, dressed well in high school, near everybody, but we did not ever let anyone know where we were from
Mhm.
because that would have changed the entire ecosystem in our popularity in high school.
Mhm.
Imagine in the early to mid '80s, your school rep was big. It's not like now where it's just kind of whatever. But so yeah, for me, it's an exciting part that I can say, even though I can remember, watching Dallas on a Friday night, wrapping Avon orders for my mom after she got off from her job or second job or what have you. Anything truly is possible. She has her own home now in Athens, Georgia, still,
Mhm.
and it's one of those rags to riches stories. Which to me, at the end of the day, if you wake up every day, that's a blessing,
Mhm.
and I see it as such. And oftentimes, even at my job, people will walk by and they're like, "Hey, how are you?" And I go, "Man, it's a holiday. Every day's a holiday." And sometimes people don't understand, and maybe they just look at me and go, "That guy's weird." Because one of my favorite sayings from the course: "Every day is a holiday. Every meal should be treated as a feast."
Mm.
And when you sit there and put things into perspective, you really can pick up, or maybe he's just being an intense, arrogant SOB or whatever. So it's perspective. It really is.
Yeah. Let's dive into that a little more. Just for our listeners' sake, where did you guys immigrate from?
Peru, from Lima, Peru.
Lima, Peru.
Yeah. We almost ended up living in Miami. So my parents, my mother's side of the house, very well-to-do family, affluent. So I can tell you that I grew up in, this is again a little bit of irony. In Lima, we had a house attendant, we had a driver, and I had a nanny, a Japanese lady named Meche. And so that's maybe why began to love the culture. But when we came here, we were immigrants. We had, I mean, we had one vehicle and we had to drive it. Imagine that.
Yeah.
So there was no Latinos in the Southeast at that time. And our first trip to visit, my mother had brothers and that worked here already. And so they said, "Oh, we're gonna, everybody rendezvous in Athens." So we landed in Miami, and we flew into Athens. And then once they saw the place or whatever, and my parents decided, okay, because for my dad it was huge. My dad literally left his entire family behind to progress and trailblaze a new family, his family, which is something that I'll never be able to repay. But it's difficult only because when we decided to move, so the first time we came to visit, the second time we decided to move, something happened in the planning, and our flight was only purchased from Lima to Miami. The second leg from Miami to Atlanta was not purchased for some reason, a mistake or whatever. So my parents, I can remember them till today. They were both sitting in Miami International. And at the time, being a 12-year-old kid, I wanted a pop. And I purposely drink these, and I'll show you. This is a plug for Coca-Cola. So this is not the American pop, by the way, but it's the glass bottle, the old-fashioned soda. And I really think because of this company, I wanted a soda at the time. So my mom says basically, here's a nickel, which is what they were at the time,
Hmm.
and says, go away. And well, instead of me making the right choice and going to get a pop, I saw this machine that had lights all over it. It's blinking. And so I put the nickel into the slot machine,
Okay.
and the slot machine hits for $280 on a nickel pull. Immediately, a policeman walks up to me, and I can distinctly look at my mother and father about 20 feet away from me, scared to death,
Oh no.
to come towards me because they know that not citizens. They know what we're attempting to do. My dad at the time had a work visa. So after a few minutes of arguing back and forth between them, they walk up to me and the guy says, "Is this your son?" They have no idea what he's saying. And so he's literally filling up his hat with nickels because it's like $280 in nickels. Anyway, long story short, my parents get the money, they transfer, they go out and buy the tickets for us to go from Miami to Athens.
Wow.
So and when I hear this story, it almost sounds incredulous, honestly. But until today, I still will not walk by a casino. That's a fact. I always walk into a casino. Um,
Wow.
it's a lot.
Man.
It's taken a lot to get here. You didn't know you were getting this, did you?
Well, no, but this is awesome. But it's almost like you were meant to keep going on to Atlanta. You weren't meant to stop in Miami.
And that's the thing. When at the time, obviously, I had no idea. But now that I'm much older, half a century, I start to realize that obedience is critical. Oftentimes, I'm one of those that believe certain people, like yourself, for example, are put in your path for a reason. Now, if you become a Pulitzer Prize winner one day because of this interview, then, all for the better. But you might even get a Peabody, who knows? But the reality is, I believe that he puts people in your path for a specific reason.
Hmm.
And it's not for me to challenge that. I've said that to my kids, and I can hear them saying my little Oscarisms nowadays. But the reality is that once you learn to be humble and accept what he's put in your path, good or bad, you
Hmm.
start to realize he'll never put more on you than you can physically, mentally take.
I do want to know. It sounds like you guys were so well off in Peru.
Mhm.
Why did you guys decide to come here and try to build a life here?
So that's a great question. And so my mom's side of the family, her brothers had already established their father was really big in iron. So everyone in Lima, in the entire capital, whether you were a construction worker, a restaurant owner, any sort of machinery fabrics, they would go to Mr. Medina. Mr. Medina was the steel person, So he built fences, he built gates, cars, bridges, frames for cars. He produced and manufactured steel. So they were very well off on my mother's side, and my father's side were into politics. And my
Okay.
grandfather was in a lot of pretty big, heavy set in politics. And so, for my mother's sake, it was to get away from that umbrella and create their own venture here in the US where it's built on them, not their parents.
Gotcha.
And that's driven me to so many levels because oftentimes, in every person that I meet, the first thing you hear is, that's so and so's son, or that's so and so's daughter, or that's so and so's heir, or whatever. And that's wonderful. It truly is. But I've always, again, because of the things my parents instilled in me, specifically my mother, your merit is your making.
Hmm.
The things that you create, the things you attain, the status you grow to should be from your effort, not someone else's. There's a really close friend of mine, and I won't mention his name to protect his integrity and honor, because he's an amazing human. But he's one of the few exceptions that I've seen here in the U.S. where a large corporation, the father hands down the heir to the son,
Hmm.
and normally it goes to crap. It always does. That second generation, they weren't prepared, they weren't vested enough, whatever. It often goes to crap. This one guy has not only made it more successful, but he's also doing the same thing to his son, which to me is truly what heritage is all about. when you build and you place your kids into a position to succeed, that's that farmer mentality where you plant that seed and you come and harvest it later. And ironically, he too is a United States Marine. So there you go. Imagine that.
All right. Yeah. All right. So, one more question about your family life when you were younger is you said to me that some of your fondest memories were cooking in the kitchen with your grandma while she
Yeah.
was gossiping and listening
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, did she immigrate with you guys?
No, actually, she never experienced. I'm sorry, she did. She traveled to New York once to visit.
Okay.
So initially, my mom and her brothers were in New York, and then they ended up, trailing into to Athens, Georgia. But no, she was, kind of like most grandmothers when they're their nanny, their built-in nanny, or what have you.
Mhm.
And she was an amazing chef, and it's probably one of the reasons that I've learned to taste in the kitchen and savor things so much, which
Okay.
is one of my joys in life is exposing my kids to different cultures so they can have their own perspective and their own opinions, but yet based on their experience, not just, oh, I don't like it just because. One of the good things that come from that is my twins, Christian, has really taken a knack for like Indian food, things that are, and he goes, there's a lot of similarities to this in Peruvian, where unlike other ethnic groups, Peruvian is more seasoned based, not so spicy.
Mhm.
Very much like the perception of Indian. Everybody thinks Indian is all curry, hot, spicy. It's really not. It really depends on what region you're from, whether it's spicy or not. But it's a lot of savory flavors. It's many, many flavors in one. It's not just like regular hot dog. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So it's different.
Okay, so then when you were making those memories with your grandma, it was like before you were 12 years old.
Hmm. Hmm.
Can you recall one of your favorite memories of hanging out with your grandma and just sort of describe it to us?
So yeah, we were getting ready for a trip. I knew that we were leaving. My little pack rat of friends did not know. So she would always make these little smoothies. Okay. In Peru, their markets are open, like in France. Everything is, you go to the market, everything's fresh. There's no packaged meat. There's no, what I mean, that doesn't exist. So you'd go to the market, get your groceries for that day, and you go home and cook. Well, in the markets, because of practicality, they would make these smoothies and put them into a plastic bag. That was like a big treat. So I got the idea one day to take this substance, this smoothie, and pour it into ice cube trays and make little pops, right?
Mhm.
So I would sell them like for, I don't know, I think it was like a soul, like maybe equivalent of a nickel or something like that. And so I did this a couple of times. I'm kind of being cautious what I say because this can be replayed. I did it a couple of times, and everybody got their product. They spent their nickel, they got their product, they loved it. We'd sit around our patio and eat this little treat. And well, the weekend that I was leaving, that's Friday night, I told everybody, I said, all right, if you want it, you got to pay up now. And then tomorrow morning, you'll get your thing. So I knew, I think I collected, I don't know, maybe like 80 cents or something. It was just some small nominal amount. Well, but I knew that Saturday morning we were leaving Peru. We were leaving Lima. It's like 6:15 in the morning. So
Mhm.
there was no pops coming. Grandma didn't know there was pops coming. So I recall we talked to them a couple of days later, and I recall her scorning me on the phone because she said she had to make these pops for these kids because
Oh,
they all ratted me out. But and even till today, I still make the little smoothies and put them in bags, which is kind of funny.
yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so now we're going to get into the part that focuses on your service and how you've sort of turned your love of food and cooking with your grandma into it's sort of how you started in Angels Alive, but can you describe for us how you married the two lifetimes together of pre-marine Oscar, who's got a love of cooking, and it seems like you were quite the entrepreneur even then,
Yeah.
to, post deployment Marine? How did you marry these two lives to create Angels Alive?
So Angels Alive really came about because we were trying. We had my boys were all, well, at the time I had 4 kids at the time, 3 kids, and my youngest son, who's my oldest son now, Antonio. was in Cub Scouts. And so I asked the kids, there's 6 of them, I believe. They're all still good friends today, which is kind of funny.
Mhm.
But I asked them, I said, hey, we're getting closer to Thanksgiving. I said, hey, how many of you guys are getting excited about cooking, right? Because Thanksgiving's coming up. It's a big thing in our house. And they were like, just kind of like looking around. Like, what do you mean cooking, man? We just show up and mom has everything, you know. And I was like, wow, so that's pretty sad, you know? And then I started understanding the dynamic that is today, where our social divide really began that early, where we do not engage our kids in the meal prep and the making or what have you.
Mhm.
It's become the quick trip dinner, right? Let's get a pizza, let's get a burger, we're on our way to the soccer field, we're gonna get some fries, throw your kid a chicken nugget and whatever. So I said, hey, I want to challenge you guys. I didn't mean like throw them, like hit them. I'm just saying, you know, just
Hello.
talking about. So I want to challenge you guys to make a side dish, and we're going to get with the church at St. Joseph's here or St. Lawrence rather, here in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And I want to find a family that's in need, you know. And I remember telling my wife at the time, you know, we have 15, 20 people that show up. None of these, and I don't want to say the word, none of these people need anything. They all have more than plenty. Let's find someone deserving that truly has nothing.
Mhm.
And again, we talked about humility at the very beginning of this conversation. So here we go. I'm guaranteeing not to cry on this one. The church gives me an address. I pull up to a house that looks just like mine. And I'm like, there's no way this person's in need. That was the unhumble Oscar. That was the pompous Oscar. And I knock on the door, and this crippled old lady walks up that's maybe 4 feet tall, and she's got 6 or 7 grandkids all around her, wondering who's at the door.
Mhm.
I take a quick look. Again, this is the Marine that comes out of me. I need to understand the scenario that I'm in really quick, assess where I'm at, figure out what my next step is. This happens in milliseconds.
Mhm.
Thankfully, when I looked around, I did not see a stitch of wood in that house. It was carpet, kids, and one boiling pot of water. It was the day before Thanksgiving. In my house, and I'm sure similarly in yours, the first 3 or 4 days before Thanksgiving, there is all kinds of stuff going on. There's flour on the floor, there's cans everywhere. And I was like, wow. So here's the beauty of this story. We walk in, we delivered mashed potatoes. I remember delivering a salad. We had a baked ham, we had a roasted turkey, then a thing of Hawaiian rolls, right?
Mhm.
And so we have 6 or 7 little Cub Scouts, and they've helped them. The deal was they had to help their mom or dad create their side, and we're going to deliver it together. That's what, you know, a Thanksgiving is truly all about.
Mhm.
We're not taking over anybody's property. We're not pretending we discovered anything. We're just giving them food,
Mhm.
and we're going to walk away. That was the plan, right? As this is happening, one of my favorite boys, who again is like a son to me, the lady grabs him like a bear hug grab. He starts freaking out. He starts like, I mean, he's getting a dry sweat. He's hyperventilating. And I immediately, again, this is kind of the trigger again. I jump in. I tell the lady, thank you very much. We got to go. I grab him in one hand, shift him, his whole body weight on one side of me. I
Mhm.
hug her. We make a quick departure. I get him to the car, and I was like, what just happened? And I calm him down. He was having a hard time breathing. What I did not know at the time was he was suffering a panic attack, because this was the first time that a Black person had ever held him, hugged
Oh.
him. And I said, well, Zachary, what? I said, so it's dumbfounding to understand these things that are coming up. He's like 11 years old at the time. So I'm, you know, cautiously saying, well, I hug you all the time.
Mhm.
He goes, yeah, but it's different. And so then I started understanding the dynamics of his perspective. And I love telling that story because it's something that helped him kind of evolve. And he's still come back, even through college, he's come back to help volunteer, which fills my heart with so much joy because it didn't scare him away. He could have easily said, oh, that's, you know, bad or whatever. But that helped him grow and patch that together,
Yeah.
and now gives him a different perspective.
Yeah.
So
Man, it's interesting how we can be afraid of things that are
that
different.
we just don't know, right? We just don't know.
Yeah.
Oftentimes that becomes a catalyst, it becomes a block. And, you know, funny enough, I always tell my kids, when I was in the Corps traveling, we were all called green by design. We were all called green. And what they did help us with, Europeans were called light green, and the dark colored people were called dark green. but they're still green was the point.
Mhm.
And how is it that we as a culture can behave, work, play, vacation like that and have no boundaries, but then when we get into society, it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
It should never be, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's just I'm taking it all in, taking it all in. That was the beginning of it.
yep.
How did it evolve into I know you fed meals to other people after that, and then you mentioned the tiny home village. Can you take us through that evolution?
Yeah. So in '07, when we first started as a group, the very first meal was one family. In '08, we started thinking, well, how can we improve it? Right. We're still working regular jobs. We've still got regular, baseball, soccer, gymnastics classes going on with kids. And so we start saying, well, let's talk to the people that we have sports with. Are they interested? Would they like to help? The second one, we ended up doing like 200 people. And last December in 2019, we fed over 5,000
Ooh,
hot meals in 4 different cities. And again, it kind of goes back to a lot of people thinking, "Oh, this guy's a really good planner," and it has nothing to do with being a good planner. Trust me, it's the chaos that I enjoy. There's
okay.
a case. It comes back to it. That's my safe spot. That's my warm and fuzzy area. That's my little blankie, if you want to call it that. But the reality is, so we started doing the meals, and then from the meals, we started realizing that there were a lot of other guys that were doing woodworking projects that would, find a lot of peace turning wood. As boring as that sounds, it really is therapeutic as all get out. I mean, it really is. And then so from there, we started partnering with bigger companies. We have a partnership with Danner, the boot company, a partnership with Men's Warehouse, where we start creating, people that are in the National Guard today or in the service, a transition point for them to go into the real world, to take their training, hopefully, and transition that into civilian life so they can, get something a little better than just a subpar job.
Yeah.
So we help them build their resumes, we help position themselves, and we walk into the network of group of friends that we have created with Home Depot, with Walmart, with Coca-Cola, with Cox Communications. And the guy walks in with a drug test in his hand from the day before and says, "Hey, I'm ready to go to work. Here's my resume. Here's my drug test. I am serious about going to work." And they're in a nice suit that's fitted by Men's Warehouse. So the impression is always they call me, the employer, the hiring manager, like, "Man, I can't believe this guy, blah, blah." And I'm thinking to myself, what? I gave you a guy who wants to work. Isn't that what you're trying to fill? And then I play about that because oftentimes their biggest complaint is that the people that they apply, they go through the roles, but they don't really want to work. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? They're just there because it's something they're supposed to do, right? So we venture into partnerships, venture into building relationships. We're going through '09, '10, 2010, and we start a PADI certification course where, we get veterans to get certified in scuba diving. And we start to amount a lot of these different things into helping rebuild that sense of camaraderie, that sense of giving. We have a partnership with Comfort Farms in Milledgeville, where Comfort Farms is a group, a therapeutic group that is a living, working farm, and they use heritage animals and heritage vegetables. They grow heirloom vegetables. But the whole point is to re-engage that person that was in crisis before, or that needs a break, a mental break, and they go down, get on the farm, learn how to raise turkeys or raise hog pens or raise mangalista hogs. But it gives them that sense of contribution, and when a veteran has lost that sense of contribution, they also seem to lose the sense of community. When they lose those two, coupled with maybe a job loss or a relationship breakup or what have you, then all
Mhm.
of a sudden you start to spiral downward. And that's where, the local law enforcement groups will call us and say, "Hey, we've got one of your guys. Something happened, whether he got off his insurance, there's no more meds. Can you come retrieve him?" And with the backing of the local law enforcement, like in Millersville, we'll show up. They give us 20 minutes ahead time.
Mhm.
We walk in, we assess, we figure out what that person needs, what their triggers are really quick, and then find a plan. If they're part of the VA already, we get them back online, we get them to a safe area so that they're mentally out of this crisis
Mhm.
problem. And if there's a chemical dependency, then we get them the help they need. But the good thing is, the realization that the Milledgeville Police Department had was that they're not trained or equipped to handle mental health issues. And, oftentimes these are not little guys, they're combat veterans. They're pretty savvy. They don't need weapons, they don't need many other things.
Yeah.
And so for us to understand the language and prepare the ability to circumvent that problem is a great asset to the police departments. And they've treated us that way.
Yeah.
They definitely support us and engage that relationship because it benefits everyone involved.
Yeah. So why is it so prevalent that combat vets go into crisis after trying to reintegrate?
Well, because there's no program today that exists that allows that person the mental ability to prepare a reentry into society. For us, for example, if I were to walk into any restaurant and stare at somebody, that's a combative state. You
Okay.
may see, oh, that guy's creepy. He's looking at me all weird. We're trying to figure out what your next move is.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that post deployment we do not like being challenged because we're one of those people that will buy those wolf tickets. You hear guys talking, "Oh, I can beat up anybody. I'm blah blah blah. I'm Billy Badass." Well, we're gonna make sure, and that's as simple as it is. Many of my friends, and that's one of the things that I partner with other organizations. One of my good acquaintances created Irreverent Warriors. Irreverent Warriors is an organization that I truly stand behind
Mhm.
and realize the brotherhood that we've created with Angels Alive because their whole purpose is to have that discussion, to have that dialogue. Even today, people that are working, they could be functionally working just to put the meat on the table. They could care less about what they do, they could care less about anything else. But when they get around other combat veterans, there's that esprit de corps, that brotherhood that comes alive, or sisterhood that comes alive
Yeah.
and becomes to give you that level of belonging, that sense of belonging. And when any human being, no matter who they are, when they have those attributes, they start to feel complete. They start to feel whole. If an individual is not contributing in their relationship, in their job, in their city, in their town, they start to isolate. And obviously, isolation with the climate that we have today, you add or sprinkle in a little bit of depression. Before you know it, I don't need these pills. Now I'm really off medically. I'm off chemically. I start to think these things that are in my head start to come to life.
What is needed to prepare someone to reintegrate?
So oftentimes, we in 2018 we rejuvenated the Red program for Angels Alive, and the whole purpose behind that was so that people could get an awareness, a social consciousness about when, let's say, little Johnny gets deployed. Little Johnny's not I mean, he may be the one that's gone, and he may be the one that you don't see at bingo night anymore. But the reality is the impact is a lot bigger than little Johnny. Little Johnny, when he comes home, will have some challenges in front of him.
Mhm.
And so, in order to prepare him, you have to set the expectations up front with the family, with the individual. And once you start integrating that person or preparing that person to make that transition, that's not just a 2 week course. That's a pretty long evolution because this person that has in whatever branch they're in, if they are mechanized in any way, if they're deployed in any way, they're going to have very specific things to do every single day. Imagine a little robot that has one functional job every single day, like the little guy at Amazon who delivers the second day packages. If all of a sudden you take him to a farm, there's no packages to deliver. There's no one telling you, hey, this is the timeline. There's no one telling you this is the schedule. And the little robot just sits there at a cornfield going, what do I do now?
Mhm.
There's no one here like me. I'm the only little robot here. That's probably a poor example, but the reality is many of us feel that disconnect, right? When
Mhm.
I came home, my parents were not really prepared. My mom would come in the room and check on me, flip the lights, an innocent gander,
Mhm.
and I would immediately jump at her. She was not ready for that.
Okay.
That freaked her out a lot.
Mhm.
Certain things we're conditioned to do on immediate response, you guys are not aware of. And those are big gaps in society.
Okay.
So when little Johnny comes home and he has no idea, his hair is very short. and his focus, his point, his eyesight is very laser driven. Some people take that a little offensively, or he responds to something very directly. Again, wow, that guy's a real asshole. Well, he just only answered exactly what I asked him. There's that perception piece.
Sure.
So I think if we had a program that would both mentally and physically prepare them to adapt to that new environment, that
Mhm.
reentry, specifically around children, that would help level set a lot of issues and circumvent a lot of problems going forward.
Okay. At Angels Alive, you're basically stepping in after these problems have already come up.
Well, we do react a good bit, right? Because they come up like little skirmishes from time to time. And that's one of the reasons that last year we started talking about, housing, tiny houses. I spent some time in Arizona, California, Utah, and Colorado, where tiny houses have been socialized really well,
Mhm.
and they've become the trend thing to have. And so I thought, wow, why don't we try that in Atlanta and see what happens? I mean, I know there's hundreds of veterans that live in up under train tracks or cars, trestles. And it's when I say, veterans, I'm not just talking about old guys like me. I'm talking about there's a lot of young guys that say, you know what, I don't really want to deal with this anymore. I
Mhm.
don't want to meet your expectations. I just want to live right here. We got a fire. We're good. Because they've all lost that sense of community. They've lost that sense of belonging. They've lost the sense of contribution. I believe it has multifacets. It's not just, hey, give them a home and they're good. You have to prepare them. You have to give them on site therapy. You have to give them access to medical therapy, to psychological help. Some of them will have chemical imbalances. We need to address that. So we're trying to be proactive, but we did begin very reactionary initially because, access, they limit access to people they don't know. Now I can go to 4 or 5 different areas in Atlanta and Athens, and they all know me, right? Because they see my face or they hear my loud voice and they go, "Oh, that's Oscar."
Mhm.
So he's not a threat, but they're very secure minded. And make no mistake, even police usually don't go and stir up, kick up people anymore like they used to. They're very security minded.
Okay. You've been, well, you reintegrated 28 years ago. That began your journey. Would you say you're still in transition, or have you reached a place where you're, not having to deal with, I don't know the right word for it. I don't want to say conditioning, but like the things that you did routinely every day that don't necessarily transfer to civilian life?
So I'm going to say it's a continual work in progress, right? Because I can distinctly name one person. His name was Dr. Cote at the University of Georgia. And this guy was a towering person. He was like 6'8", 6'9", somewhere in there. I mean, he's so high I couldn't even see that far. But I remember he was an American history professor. And he took me aside one day and he said, listen, he goes, I need you. He wasn't very kind about it, to be honest, but he said, if you spent more time on your studies, you might actually make something of yourself one day. And that was a pretty big slap in the face. And at the time, mind you, I'd already gone through the Marine Corps. So who in the hell is this guy talking to? Was
Yes.
the first intact. That was the pompous Oscar. That was the one who thought he knew everything. Just like my 18-year-old kids who think they know everything. They haven't
Mhm.
done a thing yet. But I sat there for about a week or two and really pondered on what he was talking about. And once I internalized it, it was again humbling to understand that here's this complete stranger sizing me up, and he cares enough to take me to the side and get my head straight. And that left a very big impact on me. I ended up graduating the University of Georgia, and it's been an experience because I can assure you, I've had many professors along the way that were like, "You're not the traditional guy. You're not the little kid whose mom and dad pays his, tuition or whatever." And I go, "Well, it's different, And then so I went to school, and the first 3 years it was really well, and then I got an interest. I got a job offer from Bell South. I'll never forget it. And at the time, they said, "Hey, we're going to offer you $82,000." And I was like, "What? I've never heard of that kind of money. I quit school. I want to go." Well, as I progressed after 11 years with Bell South, it became AT&T and T and everybody else. I quickly realized in order to get to that next level in engineering, I had to have a degree.
Mhm.
And a good friend of mine who worked at Nokia said, "Hey man," he goes, "you have everything going for you." And we had gone from like 200 people, 200 candidates down to two people, and he was the hiring manager, and he was a close friend of mine. But this is why I love good human beings. He says to me, he goes, "You run circles around this guy in engineering, methodologies, procedures, etc." He says, "But he's got a degree in history. We have to go with him. You have an unfinished degree." And as humbling as that was, it was again another person taking the time. Previously, I said, he puts people in your path for a reason.
Mhm.
And this gentleman, lightened me up a good ways. And again, it was humbling. It was very humbling to say, okay, well, I'm losing to a guy who could probably barely tie his shoes. But the reality is the way corporate America is set up, you have to have milestones and they have to be met, checked off, whatever. And so I went back and graduated with the purpose that I've demanded that of my kids. So how could I demand that if I never finish? So that to me was a point of life where I would look around and every student was half my age. And I had to take the example of I don't care because I'm in this because I need to be here. I want to be here. I
Yeah.
need to continue ascending. So now it's apparently the thing to be like 70 and going back to college, which is cool, but it wasn't that way in early 2013 or 2011, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So
Well, and when you were the traditional student age, you were busy doing other things, right? I mean, you were serving the country, you were
I was picking up skills that nobody really wants. This is the truth.
Oh,
No, it's very valid because think about it. I mean, there's not a job in the U.S. that wants a scout, a Marine scout that has the ability to shoot 12, 1800 meters. They don't. It's not a trade. They don't have a desire for that. They don't care about deployments or anything. They just want to see what's on paper,
yeah.
right? That speaks the truth. So it's hard to make a transition from a job that is not mirrored in the military into civilian life.
Yeah.
There's even a website out there now. I forget what the name of it is, but you put in your MOS, your job description title, and it tells you what you're best fitted for. And infantry jobs, you're going to be a warehouse employee. I mean, that's just the way it breaks down. So we try to circumvent that and say, okay, well, what kind of skills do you have?
Yeah.
If you can multitask, for example, the chaos that I play about, that's a big positive in the
Mhm.
corporate America. If you date a lot of people, if you're like a player, you work well with others, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it depends on you how you look at things. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think you're doing a lot of great things. I mean, amazing things in the community. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you would like to say?
Yes.
Okay, tell us.
First of all, thank you for taking the time to just ask. That's very meaningful. And your help with our Hoka Hey, just so you know, Mr. Davis placed 26th, I believe, out
Okay.
of like over 1,000 riders. His
Wow.
very first time out, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
He's registered to do it in 2022.
Ooh.
He'll be, yeah, so it's pretty cool. And Hoka Hey really is about taking that 10,000-mile challenge in 11 days, which seems to be almost impossible. There are many, I think there were 3 or 4 riders that experienced fatalities during this.
Oh, wow.
And there were many who had mechanical issues that couldn't finish. So when I say that I'm utterly proud of somebody like Mr. Davis, a lieutenant commander in the Navy, man, he's got a set of stones. And just so you know, I like to contribute and I like to raise the bar. So next month, I hope to be debuting our Red Ops wine. We've created
Ooh.
a Cabernet flavored fruity wine that is infused with bourbon. So it does have a little flair to it.
Oh.
And it kind of speaks about my personality because it's not just what you see in the bottle. It does pack a punch at the end of it.
Yeah.
And we hope to use that as a main funding source with any other corporation who'd like to partner up with us to help us, achieve the financial goals that is, the lumber and materials and whatnot. So if there's anyone out there who's willing to partner with us and certainly make an impact on your society, whatever city you're in, building a tiny homes community, we would love to hear from them.
Yeah. Is there a list or a place that businesses or people could go to see what you guys need or how to partner with you?
So we have our website. It's angelsalive.org, and we can share that with you. But we're going to begin. I'm not a big blogger person, but I think that we have a person that's going to be helping us with that. And it's an evolution, right? So there are some high level materials that we've already got posted, or I'm sorry, no, that haven't been posted, that will be posted, and kind of keep an open, transparent approach at this to let everyone know where we are,
Hmm.
because we've got a builder that's ensuring us that in 7 days he can build one home. They're 400 square feet, and that to us is very promising because normally that takes like months and months and months.
Yeah.
So once we get the mechanization down, I'm sure that will come in a little bit. But the point is that we can cookie cutter that and help as many people as we can.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, and just to be clear, you're giving these homes away to
Yes, ma'am.
homeless vets, correct? Just
Yep.
giving them away.
So it's going to be a partnership essentially, right? And we will be charging rent, right? So
Okay.
I want to be really clear about this. So there will be and the purpose for the rent really is for local taxes and property taxes. We are going. So I think the fee that we ended up with is like 350 a month, and so that would cover a percentage of the property taxes as well as utilities,
Okay.
because we're preferring to drill wells everywhere we go to not have that such a high thing. We're not going to have cable. Now you can stream everything. We
Hmm.
will have Wi Fi. So this is meant or designed to bring that level of contribution. We don't want to give handouts. No veteran I've ever known worth his salt would accept a handout. This is a handout. We want to ensure that not only are they that have sweat in the game, they're going to
Hmm.
help us build the homes that they're going to live in.
Okay.
So it is a contributing community, and it's again bringing that brotherhood back alive again, and continually ensuring that they have an avenue to exhaust whatever need they have. Medical, mental, physical access is the key.
Okay. Is there a goal to eventually have these veterans go beyond the community and move out? How do you
So
envision that?
what we've been going through is that everything has an evolution, right? You have a beginning, you have an end. So for us, this is going beyond the temporary housing, because if a person says, hey, I just want to live here and work on my art, that's cool. But we will be asking again with that sense of contribution that you share. If you are a good math guy, if you're a good English guy, if you're a good handyman, if you're a good small motors guy, tutor someone. We need you to be engaged. I cannot say that enough. My uncle, my godfather, taught me to turn wrenches and be a little monkey guy. And the reality is, not only is that humbling, but you have skin in the game. When you figure how to change your oil or replace a clutch or replace brakes, that's something you've done. That's not something someone can take away. When you graduate from a college and you have a diploma, no one
Mhm.
can take that away from you. That's something you delivered. So we want to build that sense of community, that sense of intensity, if you will, because we want these people to stay engaged. The engagement is the key to a lot of problems. If you're not engaged and you're chemically imbalanced, you're going to have issues. If you're engaged and you become off kilter a little bit and we notice it, then we can resolve it. If we're aware of it, we can fix it. So
Gotcha.
going long term will be if they move in, get them some stable, they begin to work. There'll be some that want to become affluent, buy their own home, buy their own apartment, whatever. That's certainly in our scope. We definitely want people to have that positive attrition.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Oscar, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you so very much. It's quite a privilege.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and learn more at humanamplified.com.